I'm going to go over is I had a wonderful pet owner send me some hamster questions. So I was going to go by these one by one. So, the first question was, how often should I be doing a 100% bedding change? I've read that's really stressful for them. So I've only been doing it every 6 months with spot cleaning every week or so. And genuinely, like, this sounds really fine to me. So, again, hamsters do use a latrine. So they do tend to like poop in one part of the cage. Sometimes they're peeing more frequently throughout the cage. So, as long as we're not having that strong ammonia smell, I think it's really fine to kind of spot clean. And then, if you find that the rest of the bedding is just getting like really stale, really musty, so anywhere between every 3 and 6 months, we can do like a partial change. Um, doing, excuse me, a full change of the bedding is a little stressful just because it's kind of removing that animal's smell from most of the environment. And then we're kind of putting them like in a new environment. So it smells totally different because these animals rely so much on olfactory cues. So, if you do find that your substrate is getting like kind of gross and kind of musty, kind of stale overall, I usually recommend just kind of doing like a half change at first and then seeing how that goes. And it is going to vary depending on the hamster, depending on the individual hamster. Some hamsters are a little bit better at kind of peeing in their latrines than others, so like the rest of the cage is not as gross. It just depends on like the size of the cage, the complexity of the cage, like what kind of bedding you're using. So there's a lot of variables there. But this whole routine is generally pretty good. And then how much food should I feed and how often? I want to encourage foraging, but when I cleaned the enclosure recently, I've had a ton of uneaten food. Should I be feeding less food or feeding less often? So not necessarily. So hamsters love to smuggle food for later. So it's okay for them to kind of hide food in the cage, as long as it's not like getting moldy and contributing to any kind of like staleness or mustiness or gross nastiness in the cage. So as far as how much you should feed, it's going to depend a little bit on the diet. I feel like Oxbow for their pellets, they're recommending something like a tablespoon a day. And that seems like a lot, but these little animals have really fast metabolism. So like pound per pound or gram for gram, their metabolism runs faster than like mine does. So if there was like a Christina-sized hamster and that hamster still had like a hamster metabolism, that hamster would eat like probably 5 times as much food as me, just throwing out like a rough number. Maybe 3 times, I don't know. And I eat a lot, so so it's going to vary a little bit. I think as long as the hamster, again, is not losing weight and we're also not getting fat, then we can kind of continue feeding the same volume of food. So more on diet. What's my overall recommended diet? Currently feed a seed mix, contains some pellets along with freeze-dried chicken treats, which is nice. Doesn't need the pellets. Also give a lavender flour mix. So probably what's happening here is we're seeing selective feeding. So the seed mixtures really aren't appropriate for hamsters. So what we want to do is feed predominantly that pelleted diet. So again, like a brand like Oxbow is fantastic. And often, like if they have something else delicious that's really energy dense, like seeds, they're going to fill up on the seeds and then not eat their pellets, which is the balanced nutrition. So I do recommend, again, keeping the pellets to about 2/3 to 3/4 of the diet that you're offering daily. You can follow just the package directions for the size of hamster that you have. I feel like this pet owner did mention they have a robo hamster, which is adorable. The pictures were wonderful. Um, so we want to keep the seed mix to a minimum. So generally, like I'll recommend that people feed the pelleted food first thing in the evening, and then add a couple seeds in the cage as a treat in the morning, or nuts, or whatever other treat like your dried chicken is great. We can add fresh foods to this diet. So there is a really great list that I found here. So this is on hamsterwelfare.com, which again is a really great site. That's where I found some of those really great photos of cool do-it-yourself hamster cages. So this particular list is from the Ontario Hamster Club, which I didn't know was a thing, but that's kind of cool. Whoops, I'm just trying to zoom in here. So this is a great list of what we can feed your hamster. So it does go over things that are in moderation. And then things that are that are unsafe, or things that are known to be dangerous. So you can feed your little hamster so many different fresh fruits and veggies and other fresh foods. And I think that that's really important to include in their diet, both for enrichment and enrichment variety, but also just for the nutrition, because fresh foods are tentatively really valuable for some animals. So adding some fresh foods in would be the only other thing I would change with this diet. So the next question was, we talked about wheel size. What about track material? I've seen sandpaper, plastic, and cork, and then more on wheels. My hamster pees on her wheel. Oh yeah, that's a hamster thing all the time. Exclusively, the wheel is a toilet. It's a cork wheel, which is annoying to clean. Absolutely, like how do you get pee out of cork? And I find they can't completely remove the urine scent from the cork. So I think that if it's becoming really stinky, you should probably replace it. I think cork is a really nice material for the wheel, but it doesn't have longevity. So, plastic and metal wheels are okay again as long as they're like solid and they have little grippy marks. I probably wouldn't use sandpaper. I feel like sandpaper would be irritating to their little feeties, especially because they do love to run on wheels. So, I'd worry that sandpaper could cause something like a pododermatitis or foot inflammation or inflammation of the foot skin. And cork, yeah, it's a really nice material, but it just doesn't have longevity. So if you find that it is getting really smelly, I would recommend replacing it. Um, so it's one of those choices to make. Like, do I want to use a plastic wheel, which will probably last a little longer, or do I want to use cork? And then know that I'm probably gonna have to replace the cork wheel, like, I don't know, once every 6 months, every 8 months. It'll depend on how much pee is going on to that and how effective you were able to like wash the pee smell out. So if it does become so strong that like you can get that ammonia whiff from the wheel, then it is irritating to her mucous membranes, and that can predispose them to respiratory conditions. So it can tentatively be harmful if it's like really, really smelly. If you find that there's just like a really like faint pee smell, it's hard to say. It's probably a little stronger to her, but if she's still using the wheel and it's really faint, it might not be dangerous. So I think overall, like you can err on the side of caution, and once it starts to smell strongly, I would just replace the wheel. Um, Hard to say what that threshold is going to be, honestly. Like unless we're like have a way to like detect the amount of ammonia that's in the air in the cage. And then signs that a hamster is stressed or unhappy in their environment. So, cage bar chewing, or other stereotypical behaviors. So, if we have anything that the hamster kind of like routinely tries to bite on, and it just becomes a stereotypical behavior, so they're just doing it and doing it and doing it, then that's a sign of stress. If we're doing like just like the laps in the cage and not stopping, so that's another stereotypical behavior. That's a sign of stress. Or hamsters are like suddenly like really cranky and they weren't cranky before. Or likewise, hamsters that were normally cranky or, become like really placid. Like those are often signs that something's not right. And then when I pet my hamster's ear, she closes her eyes and gets really still. Is that stress or is she relaxed? She's probably relaxed. That's adorable. Hamsters do tend to let you know when they're unhappy. They like to bite. So, sorry, going back to the last slide, a hamster that bites you is probably not happy. Um, these little robo hamsters and other dwarf hamsters, they can be so sweet and like really enjoy their time with their humans. So she's probably relaxed in this case. I've seen lots of animals where people say they don't like to be pet, and then you see like really nice behaviors like this, and you're like, I think they like to be pet. And do hamsters need or benefit from UV exposure? So the jury's out on this. We're actually seeing some evidence that some of our daytime active animals, like guinea pigs, chinchillas, and rabbits, would probably benefit from UV exposure. There's a question as to whether that can help to prevent some acquired dental disease that's occurring in old age, but we'll pull up some papers and go over that another evening. We don't have any evidence that's beneficial in these crepuscular animals. So far the answer is no, but there's always a question mark. We might learn something in the future that suggests that they should have UV exposure, so it's hard to say right now. And then signs of illness. So this is a great one because again, these are cryptic little prey animals, and they can be very, very cryptic about what they let us know. So hamsters that are having any kind of major behavioral change, if we're seeing any weight loss, and I do usually recommend for pet owners to weigh their hamster weekly or every other week just to see an idea of trends. Because if we're starting to gain weight, but our body condition isn't changing, then we kind of worry about like fluid or a tumor. But if we're seeing weight loss and there's no other explanation for it, then that's also a sign of concern. So, weighing these little guys is a great thing to do at home, and it's usually pretty simple. The kitchen scales are quite cheap. Um, Things like any dramatic change in water intake and urine output. So, we sometimes will see hamsters do or present with what we call polyuria and polydipsia. So polyuria is an excessive urine production, polydipsia is an excessive thirst. So PUPD is what we call it. That can be a sign of so many different problems, like hamsters. Maybe not so much in dwarf hamsters, but we do see like Cushing's disease, so hyperadrenocorticism occur in other species of hamsters, like Syrian hamsters. We definitely see that in. And it can be a sign of things like abdominal pains. So sometimes animals, these little guys, will just drink and pee more because they are painful. So things like ovarian cysts can be sneaky and hiding. So any dramatic change in water intake and urine output. So if you find again like the cage is getting soaked much quicker, or the cage is smellier because there's more pee, that's really important to look out for. And of course, any lumps and bumps on an animal, we should take a look at those. Like lumps and bumps can be so many different things. So I hope that's helpful. So that's it for tonight.